Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Berglund box. It's here at last. Oh, yes, Paavo Berglund's complete EMI/Warner recordings with, 42 CDs. They're recordings from 1970 to 1977, some of which are first recordings on CD. Now, Berglund was a splendid conductor. He really was. And there's like no Beethoven cycles here and no Brahms cycles. You get 3 Sibelius cycles because he was Finnish and he was supposed to do Sibelius. And actually, he did some very interesting Sibelius. He discovered or rediscovered and performed first the Kullervo Symphony, for example, which he did twice, I think. And actually, his recordings are of a very high standard. He was an excellent orchestra trainer. For most of his early career, he had the Bournemouth Symphony, that is, on EMI. He had the Bournemouth Symphony, and he had them playing at a reasonably high standard, very high standard at times, and he made some amazing recordings with them. And then he decamped back to Helsinki, and he did all kinds of other stuff. But we're going to go through here, and we're going to see what he did. He was not a conductor of the, how do you describe it? He wasn't like crazy romantic type. He was more intellectual in his approach sometimes, but not at the expense of emotional expression. I don't know. I hate to characterize these things. You can't really do it in words unless something is like grotesque. And he was never grotesque. He wasn't. So let's, look at all these. Look at all these CDs, just millions of CDs. Now, 42 of them. We're going to go through them, and I'm going to tell you how they are, because I've heard them all multiple times. Okay, so you get a nice little bookie that talks about Berglund himself, and then we begin the recorded legacy. He did some unusual recordings in Bournemouth. He did, look at this, Arthur Bliss, his cello concerto, which is a lovely work, and his ballet Miracle in the Gorbals, which is also fun to listen to. Discovery of the Suicide's Body. The Suicide's Body Brought In, The Dance of Deliverance, The Killing of the Stranger. Doesn't that sound like hot stuff? It's a seamy, interesting ballet. It really is. And this is the suite. So this was like, how did we hear about Berglund? Well, because he was doing Arthur Bliss. Yeah. Then we get the Brahms Double Concerto, and that's all that's on here. He was an accompanist. He was, a conductor you could bring in to accompany more famous people. In this case, the more famous people were Yehudi Menuhin and Paul Tortelier. So I remember I said there's no Brahms and no Beethoven. No symphony cycles is what I meant here. So there is Brahms, obviously. Is it a good double concerto? Yeah, it's a good double concerto. It's at the London Phil. It's not a performance that anyone's going to scream about. But there he was. Then we have the Britten Violin Concerto and the Walton Violin Concerto with Ida Handel. This is a wonderful disc. He made a bunch of recordings with Ida Handel, including Sibelius and other things. And they're the highlights of her discography, and they're wonderful performances. She was a great proponent of contemporary music, by the way, and just a splendid violinist. So this is with Bournemouth, and that's like a major release. And then, look at this. Yes, of course, the Franck D minor. A wonderful performance of the Franck D minor. Does anyone talk about Paavo Berglund in connection with the Franck D minor and the Bournemouth Symphony and the symphonic variations with Sylvia Kirstenbaum piano? This is a sleeper of a disc. Really first-class performances. The Franck symphony is remarkably unclogged and just structurally cohesive, and it's a good performance. It really is. It doesn't have any dead spots. It's go figure. Glazunov Piano Concerto in F minor. Oh, this is a wonderful work. It really is, with John Ogden and the Richard Yardumian Passacaglia Recitative and Fugue, which is a piano concerto, again with John Ogden, one of John Ogden's more interesting recordings. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a good thing when you're not like a hotshot conductor and you have to do unusual repertoire with interesting soloists. That wasn't a bad thing. More John Ogden, the Grieg and Schumann, with the New Philharmonia in Berglund. Okay, well, there are a million great Griegs and Schumanns, and Ogden's is not up there on, I think, with either of them. The Grieg is, I think, a little better than the Schumann, but, it's nice to have. I mean, Ogden fans will want it, of course, and he was in good form for all of these things. So there we go. And then we've got Grieg, the Scandinavian stuff, which, of course, Berglund quickly fell into that niche. Even, he may not have wanted to always be there because he was Scandinavian. So there you go. Grieg, Peer Gynt Suites 1 and 2, Alphen, Swedish Rhapsody No. 1, the Elegy from King Gustav Adolf II, and Edvard Armas Hjernefelt, his Prelude in F major, that little 2-minute thingy that everybody does. They're great performances, wonderful performances. I mean, Berglund was good at Scandinavian stuff. I hate to say it because he was Scandinavian, but he did that music with conviction, not just, I think, out of like necessity because the label said, you got to do it because you're a Scandinavier, Then we've got more Grieg, the symphonic dances and the old Norwegian romance with variations. Lovely, lovely performances of works that at the time were very unknown. Nowadays, of course, there are a million Grieg cycles and things coming out all the time. But back in the day, nobody knew this stuff. And it was very nice to have. Nielsen 5 with Bournemouth. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Berglund was never as good with Nielsen as he was with Sibelius. His Nielsen cycle, he did a cycle for RCA, is awful. It's just awful. Really not the same. I don't know what it was about Nielsen. Maybe it was the music's muscularity and boniness that just wasn't his cup of tea. This is much better than his later fifth, I will say. It's not terrible at all. But again, you miss some of the edge that the best Nielsen performances always have. I mean, it's good that he did this. At the time, nobody was doing Nielsen either. But, sometimes just because you're Scandinavian, that doesn't mean you're going to be great at Scandinavian stuff. Rachmaninoff, Piano Concerto 3 and 5 Etude Tableau. Well, that's solo with Leif Ove Ansnes and the Oslo Philharmonic. People who like Ansnes like this. It's a good Rachmaninoff third. It really is. It's perfectly fine. It's not a Berglund disc. Well, here's a Berglund disc. This is the kind of stuff. Rimsky, the Golden Cockerel Suite. Wonderful. Oh, gosh, I love the Golden Cockerel Suite. It's so fabulous. And then Prokofiev's Summer Night, which is his suite from the opera The Duenna, the landlady or whatever she was. Anyway, this is great. Great stuff. Unusual, interesting repertoire. Beautifully played. All right, now here we go. Wait a minute. Okay. Shostakovich Leningrad Symphony. When this came out, nobody knew the Leningrad Symphony. It was as good as unknown, and it was very exciting to see this thing show up at long last. It was big. I remember the Penguin Guide review of it. They said it's very loud and very long, and it was, but it's fun. It's lots of fun. Shostakovich Piano Concertos with Christina Ortiz and Bournemouth is a very good disc. Again, at a time when the pieces were not as well known as they later became. So that's definitely worth hearing. Then Shostakovich's 5th and 10th symphonies. Although they're coupled a little differently. You get 5 and 6. 6 is a reference recording. Oh, that was hot when that came out. Wow, it blew everybody away. Nobody knew the 6th very well, and this performance was so exciting. The 5th is very good. It's a very good performance. It's not as exciting as the 6th. The 10th is also very good, but there are also excellent versions of the 10th. But these were all idiomatic, fresh, exciting performances of music that just wasn't as well known at the time. It really wasn't. So this is discs 14 and 15. Those go there. And the 11th, which nobody knew it when this came out. Boy, was that exciting. Wow. I mean, it was just a powerful, wonderful vintage EMI recording. And the Bournemouth Symphony was playing at this point at an internationally fabulous level. They really were. And my God, the climaxes in the second movement and the finale, they're just crushing. Absolutely fabulous. The tempos were so slow and dark. 18 minutes for the first movement. I mean, you'd think it would be terrible. But Berglund sustains it. He really does. But it was a 2-disc set of 11 and 6. And they have it sort of recoupled so that you can get it all onto 2 CDs there. Then we have the first recording of Kullervo. And now we're going to like do a big skip. First of all, this was a major thing. The Kullervo Symphony was just huge to have this for the first time, and it was wonderful and brilliant. People who love Sibelius just went, "Oh my God, how unbelievably nifty!" However, there are 3 Sibelius cycles in here with tone poems and all kinds of other goodies. And I'm going to just sort of go through this, and we're going to talk about them in a clump. It's just easier because there are 2 Kullervos. I mean, some other choral works, The Origin of Fire in Our Native Land, tone poems galore, strange violin pieces with Ida Handel. Let's see, there's the Helsinki Philharmonic, and then there's Chamber Orchestra Europe. Okay, so let's get all of this stuff together. That's like a big clump. It's going from, let's see, oh my God, yes, Kullervo goes from disc 17 to disc 37 is all Sibelius. Now, Berglund was very honest about his approach to the Sibelius symphonies. He didn't want to do them all the same every time. He had some distinctive characteristics, that some one of which bothered me, like the slow tempo for the finale of the 6th Symphony that he always did. But basically, he was a wonderful Sibelius conductor. He really was. I mean, no question about that. The first cycle with Bournemouth is often considered to be the best because it's, in its way, the most emotionally comprehensive. You know, the Bournemouth Symphony had a certain edge and rawness to its sound, although they were certainly well disciplined. But there was that. You know, some people said it was because they were a provincial orchestra. I don't know what it was. They played really well. And they sounded so right for Sibelius in that first symphony cycle because Sibelius has that edge, that darkness, that gnarliness that really came through wonderfully well in the first cycle, along with very sensible tempos, beautiful balances. I mean, it was a wonderful Sibelius cycle. I mean, an echt Sibelius cycle. It had echtacity. By an echt Finnish guy. So that was really great, along with all the other things he did, the violin pieces and all this other stuff. I mean, all the tone poems, it was wonderful to hear. Then he remade the stuff in digital with the Helsinki Philharmonic, and it suffered a little bit from not great digital sonics, although they've been cleaned up a little bit here, I think. Not just for this remastering, but in general. I mean, they fixed some of the things that weren't so wonderful. Those performances were more refined, a little bit more relaxed. I mean, it was, you know, the Finns doing Finnish stuff. There was this sort of, you know, comfort with the music that you didn't hear to the same degree with Bournemouth. And I think it made that cycle, well, it was a little bit better played. In some ways, the strings were better. And some of the performances, I think, may have had, you know, just a little bit more cogency, you know, the 3rd Symphony perhaps, and I don't know. What I can say is it was a more homogenized sound. Then came the Chamber Orchestra of Europe. Well, it's a chamber orchestra. And he just did the symphonies. There were no extra tone poems or other things along with it. And the symphony cycle, he said himself, he said, "I'm doing this for me. I'm doing it because I want to hear every detail of Sibelius's orchestration, and particularly the string parts." And you do. They are not performances for people who want perhaps the wider, general, emotional, encompassing aura of Sibelius. They're very specific in their intent. And you do hear things. I remember particularly in the second half of the first movement of the 5th Symphony, you know, where the strings are just doing all of that, you know, before it comes together for the big peroration at the very end. There actually is like, there is a melody there. There are fragments of tunes in this sea of string figuration. And he really brings it out. You really hear things you haven't heard before in those performances. They're very interesting for that reason, for points of detail. But he's not as interested in the big picture. And so they're marvelously well done. They are the work of, you know, a master conductor in music that he's known and loved all his life, who's just doing it for himself to hear special things. And you have to just accept them for that. So the Bournemouth cycle is great. The later one is individual. The middle one is very lovely, but it's not. I would stick with Bournemouth. But here they are. You can hear the whole progression in his understanding of Sibelius, and you've got to be a very hardcore Sibelian or Berglund follower to be interested in that. But still, it's good to have, and I like it. I like it. I mean, I think it's wonderful. Then we've got an absolutely first-class Mavlast with the Staatskapelle Dresden. I mean, this was a shocker. Who would have thought, right? And he does it so well. Beautiful, beautiful performance. Lovely, wonderful, great playing. It's as good as any of the Czech ones. I mean, I was amazed, absolutely amazed. Vaughan Williams 6, Oboe Concerto, and Dvorak Scherzo Capriccioso, and A-flat Slavonic Rhapsody, which is the third. This is another wonderful disc. I mean, the Vaughan Williams is intense, much more so than like Adrian Bolt was doing it. And the Oboe Concerto is lovely. There aren't so many recordings of it. And the Staatskapelle Dresden do the Dvorak pieces. And they're a couple of the best performances of those you'll ever hear in your life. The third Slavonic Rhapsody, nobody knows. So it's amazing and wonderful that we have it here. That was another great disc. Then we've got the Vaughan Williams Fourth and the Lark Ascending. This is hot. This fourth is absolutely the most intense and exciting since Vaughan Williams' own, or maybe the Metropolis. They just blast through it with all of the nastiness and viciousness and gnarliness and rage that the music contains. It's just terrific. The Lark Ascending is nice too, but really it's the fourth. That's the big deal. This is with the Royal Philharmonic, and it's a vintage EMI recording. Glorious sonics. Then we've got the Shostakovich and Walton cello concertos. Shostakovich first with Paul Tortelier. Very nicely done with Bournemouth. You don't need to talk more about that. And then we have this disc of all kinds of short tchotchkes. The Halverson Entry of the Boyars, the Sibelius Karelia Suite, and M. Shalister Moldavian Dance, Liana, Ola Bull, the Herd Girls Sunday, Glinka's Valse Fantasy, Rimsky-Korsakov's May Night Overture, Glazanov's Valse de Concert with Bournemouth. A very interesting disc of usual and unusual pieces. And that, my friends, is the Berglund edition on EMI. Now, I can't say that, that you need 3 Sibelius cycles by the same guy, and a lot of tone poems and other things that are duplicated too. I mean, that's really an individual choice. But the artistic quality is certainly there. I think he was a wonderful conductor. I really do. There is more stuff that he did, for RCA. It was a Rachmaninoff Third Symphony, I think. Other things like that. It would be awfully nice to be able to have those. Let me see if can I get these put away. Almost. There's the first one, Bliss. Yes, there we go. I did it. I got it. And I'm happy to have this box. I really think he was a seriously fine conductor, and I'm happy to have whatever he did. But it is certainly a collector's edition. And if you're a collector, then edition to your heart's content. Absolutely go for it. If you're a normal person, I can't say that this is essential. But I think there are enough collectors out there to justify EMI doing this. And I hope you will all go for it while you can, because I guarantee it's not going to be available for that long. Keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.